That's fine. No, this is fine. Perfect. Good morning, everybody. My name is Nishal Goburdhan, and I'm an insight analyst at Packet Clearinghouse. And I'm thrilled to be here. 24 minutes of sleep, but let's hope that I can help you understand what peering and peering forums are all about and how you can extract the most value out of this. As soon as the clicker wants to talk back to me, we can move on. Nope. This is the fun part about being the first person. You always get to experience all the technical problems that happen. So when Hisham asked me to come and talk this morning, he said, effectively, I'd like you to talk about a few key concepts. The first is why peering matters in terms that normal people would understand. And I'd like for you to talk a little bit about the economics of peering so that people could get it out of their heads that peering is this very technical, very complex mechanism that has to happen for the internet to work. And then I'd like you to explain how we've used peering forums in other parts of the world to strengthen the internet and to make the internet better for everybody. I guess that's the mission, but also to grow the internet and to grow peering inside the region. For context, Hisham and I have worked together. Most of you know Hisham from the NCC. We've worked together for quite a while, probably 10 years now, with the African Peering and Interconnection Forum. So a lot of what I'll tell you will come out of that context. We still don't have a clicker. So a little bit about PCH, because it's the only thing I really want to say about PCH is I am not here to sell you anything. We are not a vendor, so I'm not trying to sell you a product. You don't have to listen to me. But what I hope you will take away is that you're listening to someone who's done this sort of stuff across the world. We do it on a non-profit basis. So, there's no bias attached to that, really. This is a picture from Qaeda. This is typically how we think about the internet, or if we have to draw the internet, this is what the internet would look like, at least according to internet researchers. But a picture like this is kind of meaningless for human beings. There's way too much information in there. So I'd like to think about the internet, or the way that I like to think about the internet is usually the internet that I grew up with, the internet that when I connected to the internet as a network operator in the 90s, it was an internet that was split into a loose hierarchical structure. Now, at the bottom, we've got third tier ISPs. This is typically a small internet service provider, an internet service provider that might be operational only in one town or only in one region or only in one country, whatever it is. And please don't get caught up on the idea of the term third tier or local ISP. It's just a way for me to try to explain that there are different internet service providers performing different functions. We have a middle tier, which is a second internet service, second level or regional internet service provider. And this is probably an internet service provider that works across multiple countries, probably across the continent, depending on the side. And then off the top, we've got the so-called first tier or tier one global service providers. Again, please, I don't want to get into a discussion or argument about what tier one is. What I just want you to see is that there is still this sort of loose hierarchy on the internet. But understanding that there's a loose hierarchy on the internet is less important than understanding what, to me, is the thing that I want you to remember. And that is, how does the money flow? And in this picture, what you're seeing is that the money flows from the bottom internet service provider, all the way up to the top. What's important is the money flows in one direction only, even though the small internet service providers are actually performing a useful function. They're collecting customers and bringing them. They don't get compensated for this. No. If you're an internet service provider, if you're running a business, you know that to connect to the internet, you have to pay your transit provider. Your transit provider doesn't come to you and say, thank you so much for doing all the work of collecting all of these customers in some really difficult places. Here's some money for you. It doesn't work that way. And let's see if you are all awake. I'm going to tell you a joke, so please laugh. I know what you're going to say. You're going to say, it's the Indian guy in the room and he's talking about money. That was a joke. It's true. It's true. The stereotype is there. The Indian guy is talking about money. But I want you to see how this affects you and how it affects your business. So we understand now how the money is flowing. And then this has been the model for the internet since about the time that the NSF withdrew its grants and internet service providers started to figure out how to connect to each other. What became very clear was for internet traffic to work across the world, the interconnections had to happen somewhere. And they happen at the green connections that we see at the top. The tier 1 internet service providers at some point all interconnect with each other or interconnect with parts of each other. And that's how we know, or that's how we think about the internet eventually working. If you want to send an email to my cousin who is in New Zealand, who is halfway across the world for you, chances are it's probably going to go through one of the internet service providers at the very top, simply because the distance between the countries is so great. But what happened was that we started to understand the mid-tier, the second-tier network service providers started to understand. Can you? Now I've lost my trigger. The mid-tier service providers started to understand that if the tier 1 service providers were interconnecting at the top in those green lines, and all that they were doing was to move traffic between the networks, and that was creating bandwidth, creating network traffic, then surely this is something that we can do for ourselves. And that's what started to happen. In about 1993, 1994, the internet service providers, not just the tier 1, started to realize that it was healthy, it was good, and it was economically beneficial for them to start to create their own interconnects. And I've drawn that in there as the pink lines that you'd see. And what happened after that was that these massive interconnections started to create these neutral points, internet exchange points. The first internet exchange point in the world started on the east coast of the United States of America. And it started literally because although the telcos were on the East Coast, we have a, no? The internet exchange point started because although the telcos were on the East Coast and peering was on the East Coast, there were operators on the West Coast who didn't want to move traffic backwards and forwards. And so, internet exchanges were born. Let's leave it at that. That's the neutral cloud in the middle. And today what we have is we have an environment where we have internet service providers of all types, of all kinds, of all service providers. And in fact, not just internet service providers. We have internet networks that run some kind of internet business that feel that they can benefit from connecting to an internet exchange point. They connect to exchange points and they perform what we call peering. So this is a good time for us to get to the next slide, which explains a little bit about what peering in transit is. And these are terms that we're going to use quite a lot, not just when I'm talking today, but you're going to hear them being said over the course of the next day. So it's really important we get a good functional understanding of the difference. Hopefully, this is not a new term to you. Hopefully, most of you are familiar with what transit is. At least transit is the thing that we grew up on. We have to pay money to our upstream provider, and as a function of us paying money to the upstream provider, they carry our packets across the internet. And that's transit. That's simply what it is. It's a business relationship. There's no niceties about it. I give you money, you give me packets. That's a commercial agreement. But peering agreements are very different. Peering agreements are agreements with large carriers, sometimes large interconnection providers, that says, I will allow you to get access to all of my customers. And when I allow you to get access to my customers, you will allow me to get access to your customers, and we don't charge each other for this. And peering today carries a significant amount of internet traffic. We don't have a way of determining how much percentage-wise, because not everybody shares their statistics, but it's a significant part of internet traffic. And more importantly, it's the part of internet traffic that has caused us to actually be able to scale the growth of our networks. There's this statistic that says that the internet doubles in size every 11 months. So every 11 months, the networks that we were running are effectively twice the size that they were, either in terms of bandwidth, either in terms of users, whatever metric you want to think about. The only way we can scale to any kind of, to that sort of growth is not to be in a position where we're constantly paying more money. And hopefully at the end of this presentation, you'll understand how we do that with peering. Next slide, please. So another very simple truth I want you to understand: regardless of how you connect to the internet, there are only 3 ways that packets can move. I'll say that again. Regardless of how you're trying to connect to the internet, regardless of what kind of network you run, there are only 3 ways that can define how packets move across that network. And by move here, I'm talking about how we monetize those packets, okay? So the very, very, very simple example is if you're an internet service provider and you have a customer that's talking to another one of your customers. If you're the green network and you have 2 green customers, then you earn 1 unit from your customer on the left, you earn another unit from the customer on the right. And at the end of the day, you walk away having earned 2 units. Now, this is fantastic because you don't have to pay anybody to move traffic between your customers. You're collecting on both sides, and yeah, this is all great. But this is also not practical. There is no network in the world, no single network that is large enough to carry all the traffic that we need. The biggest internet service provider in the world today is Lumen, otherwise known as Level 3. And if you're paying attention to the news, you will see that Lumen literally yesterday announced that they want to sell off their European businesses to Colt in, I guess, the UK. So even the biggest of the big service providers are realizing that I'm going to be one network that runs across the world. That's not a sustainable business model. The next way that we can move packets across our network is if we are not the only network, but there's a transit network in between. So here we've got the green internet service provider with a green customer that's trying to talk to the red internet service provider who's got a red customer there. Maybe they're sending email to my cousin. But in the middle, we've got this transit provider. What happens is that the green network operator earns money. The red network operator also earns money on their side, but they've got to pay a small portion of that to the transit service provider, or whatever that's going to be. We call it X. At the end of the day, the earnings that each network takes away is 1 minus X. They've earned 1 unit and they've got to pay a little bit of transit. And you can see immediately that this is less preferential to the situation where the service provider was earning 2 units. Okay? The last and the only other way that packets can move across a network is if you have 2 internet service providers trying to communicate with each other, but instead of going through a transit network, instead they go through an internet exchange point. And in this example, again, we earn money, 1 unit on both sides, but we don't pay for the privilege of money of traffic going through the internet exchange point. So yes, I've got my costs in setting up and maintaining and running my business, but those costs are always going to be there. They're sunk costs, as we call them, right? But I'm not paying another network for carrying my traffic. That's the big thing here. So at the end of the day, I've earned 1, but I'm spending 0 in terms of traffic costs at the internet exchange point. And well, I earn 1. So 3 situations. A situation where you earn 2, a situation where you earn 1 minus X, and a situation where you earn 1. And usually at this point, I ask people, where do you want to be? Which situation, 1, 2, or 3? Do you want to earn 2? Do you want to earn 1 minus X, or do you want to earn 1? But we've already explained that it's not really possible to earn 2. That's a theoretical model entirely. So you're down to 2 options. Do you want to earn 1 minus X, or do you want to earn 1? And the math there is really simple, even if it is 7:30 in the morning, my time, and you've had 24 minutes of sleep. The math is really simple. Any rational network operator will always want to earn 1. And so any rational network operator is always going to try to maximize what they can get out of their peering. If I had little important things for you to remember on my slides, this would be the first that I'd ask you to remember. That maximizing the utility that you get on your peering is going to lower your network operations. And you see why. So I'll pause here. The nice thing about the newcomer session is it's not the formal meeting, so we can be a little bit informal. So I'm going to pause here to ask if you can think of a situation where traffic doesn't follow those 3 situations that I've described. Anybody? No? Good, because there aren't any. And if there aren't any other ways that you can send traffic, then you understand why this sentence makes a lot of sense. All right. Over the years, we've had to think and rethink about how we get connected to the different networks to perform this thing called peering. Without going into the history of internet exchange points, we've tried many different technologies. We've tried many different ways of interconnections. But today, the one thing that sort of works for everybody is that we've come to accept that layer 2 switching is the best, the preferred way to run an internet exchange point. So, regardless of some of the other technologies that have been out there, regardless of some of the experiments that we've had over the years, layer 2 switching, having everybody in the same broadcast network, that's actually the best way that we build these interconnection points, these internet exchanges. And today, these internet exchanges are spread all across the world. We've got this, I took this a few days ago. There were 712 active internet exchange points that were operating across the world. The largest, if we had to think about them on a country perspective, the 3 countries that have the most internet exchanges are the United States. They have more than 85 last I looked. Germany, who has just over 30, and Brazil. Most of the other countries are still developing. I live in South Africa, so we're all the way at the bottom there. We've got 6 internet exchange points in my country, and I think that's a lot for the size of country we have. But you can see there's still large parts of the world that don't have internet exchange points, right? And that's a problem that we have to fix. And worse, the one thing I don't like about this map is it shows internet exchange points on a country basis. Internet exchange points are not something that just go to a country. When I talk about exchange points, I always say that internet exchange points should really be in every city. My rule of thumb is that if you have a population of about 300,000 people, if you have people that are using the internet, so, not 300,000 people that are just surfing all day or, wasting their time. And if you have businesses, then you have a need for interconnection. And ultimately, today it's 712, but ultimately I would want to see this number at least be 10, maybe 20, 30 times that, because there are many, many large cities that just don't have internet exchanges yet. And if we get some time, maybe we can talk about that a little later on. But you can see the spread of exchange points and, well, what's missing. So far we know that when we peer, we're peering really to try to get cost reduction down. That's primarily the reason that we want to do this. I work at Packet Clearinghouse at PCH, and we have a mantra that we say, and that is that peering reduces the average per bit delivery cost of the network, or the APBDC. That's a fun acronym. Why should all the doctors be the only ones that make up funny words? But literally what that means is peering must make your network cheaper to run. And if it's not making your network cheaper to run, then there's something wrong with that. And again, let's hope we can discuss that at the end of this as well, some of the reasons that exchanges and peering don't work. So peering is an economic tool. I think that that's easy to understand. And perhaps if you walked in here today thinking that peering is something that's really technical and it's something that only internet service providers should be doing, I hope that I'm going to be able to change your mind, because it's not the super technical thing. It actually is quite easy. Anybody that does BGP will tell you this. And it certainly isn't something that's only meant for internet service providers. If you're a bank, if you're a broadcasting company, if you're a media station, if you have any kind of internet business that will benefit from reduced costs and greater access to more networks, then peering is something that you should be thinking about doing. There's other reasons as well that we peer, of course. There's performance. You're getting closer to the people that you'd want to get your data from, or you'd want to send your data to, right? Today, in today's modern internet, there's this very important concept of sovereign data. Why should my traffic, or traffic between me and another participant in my country, why should that have to go through a foreign nation that may be intercepting, that may be sniffing, that may be listening in for business secrets or whatever the case is, right? This is a real issue today. We've already seen this play out in many, many ways across the internet. And the thing that I like to talk about, or the thing I like to think about, is also, I think, something that we don't appreciate too much. And that is, how do we start to create and build our own knowledge economy? And yes, I know those are politician words, but it's also true. How do we start to build and create smart people in our ecosystem that are going to go out and talk to the rest of the world about how we do things here if we don't start investing in ourselves? And for me, an exchange point is one of those important ways that we can use to build local investment. Next slide. So I want to speak a little bit about internet service providers and their role in interconnecting, and how in some cases they have helped, and how in some cases they have hindered the internet exchanges. But perhaps for those of you that are not internet service providers, to understand where we were and how we got to this point. And I think that's less important than for me, hopefully, to point out another part, which is how traffic moves on the internet and how costs move with that. So if you remember that bit, I think I'll be happy. This is the internet again, how we grew, how we knew it, when we probably first got connected. There was one internet service provider in your country, probably a single transit provider, or if you were an internet service provider, you were buying from one internet service provider, and that internet service provider probably wasn't in your country. You had a lot of customers, right? Because everybody wanted to get onto the internet. And the customers were paying you in your local currency because they're in your country. They're going to pay you in your local currency. But the internet service provider that you were buying services from was probably an internet service provider that came out of, I guess, maybe in this part of the world, Russia or China or Japan, Gulf states. It doesn't matter where they came out of. What mattered was when you were paying them, you weren't paying them in your domestic currency, were you? You were paying them in rubles, US dollars, euros, pounds, some foreign currency. I'm going to say this again. You're collecting money from your customers in local currency, local money. You're spending part of it to run your business. And then you're paying your upstream transit provider in a foreign currency, a currency that is not yours. I'm not an expert on this part of the world and the economics here, but I know a little bit about the economics in my part of the world. And I know that every year, unfortunately, my currency, I'm from South Africa, my currency falls horribly against foreign leading currencies. So every year, I'm collecting, say, $1 for my customers, but that $1's real purchasing price against what I'm going to pay my service provider becomes less and less. I'm acting less of an internet service provider in this model than I am as a foreign exchange agent. That's what I am, a foreign exchange agent who just happens to provide internet services, right? There's lots of things wrong with this. Aside from the fact that you're not providing services to your customers, you're just taking their money and giving them a little bit of internet access and paying overseas. You're, sorry. In a model like this, you're ripe for takeover. If a foreign internet service provider that didn't have to worry about those foreign exchange costs decided to deploy in your environment, they've already got an economic advantage over you because they don't have to pay those foreign exchange costs, okay? This isn't sustainable. And I guess the internet stayed this way for a short period of time in many places across the world, more so in places that had strict or really, really tight regulatory regimes. But in open markets, this model didn't work for a very long time. What worked instead was the next one. And here you can see what we've done is we've added a redundant transit provider. Now, this is the natural next step to an internet service provider having one transit operator, okay? You add a second transit operator because you think, oh, it's going to give me redundancy and that's important to me. What you don't know is that when you add a second redundant transit provider, what you're also doing is least cost routing. Whether you realize it or not, and maybe you do, but whether you realize it or not, you are making the path between your customers and the internet shorter. Let me show you how. So in the first model, where you had one transit provider, let's say you were trying to get to two popular websites on the internet. Let's call A search engine, and let's call B a social media site, since those are the things that people like to use today. And the numbers look really small. I hope you can read them. But in the first example, the network A is 5 hops away from you, and network B is 7 hops away from you. Your users are using the internet. They don't know about any of this. They just know that they are connecting to you. You are taking them to this website, and life is fine. From your perspective, the average length or the number of hops that you would need to get to the important content on the internet is 6. That's really simple, right? 7 and 5 divided by 2. But then we add our second internet service provider. And when we add our second internet service provider, if you're smart, you're buying from an internet service provider that is not the same as the first, as the red one. You're buying from somebody who has hopefully different routing characteristics. And in this example, the green network is 6 hops away to our search engine, but only 3 hops away to that popular social media site. The network, this is your network, when it now tries to route to what we see here, is going to choose the paths that are going to be more preferred to it. So it's going to choose the shorter paths. And if we see on the next slide, it's going to pick the shorter path to the search engine and the shorter path to the social media site. 5 and 3 is 8. The average number of hops are 4. This is a really simple example, and the number of hops and the sites and everything that we're choosing is less important than remembering one thing. What we're trying to do fundamentally, what's going to work better for us, is if we can reduce the number of hops, the dependencies between us and either the users or the content that we are going to get to. And what I want to show you here is that whether you realize it or not, the network's natural tendency is to do that thing, to reduce the number of hops. It does it automatically, right? BGP. Next slide, please. Now, even though we've got 2 internet service providers and we've seen that we've got some least cost routing going, we still have one problem. And that one problem is that we're still largely acting as a foreign exchange agent. There's no domestic exchange of traffic. And this is the first sort of important thing that we resolve when we introduce an internet exchange point, a single internet exchange point in our country. Now you're giving users the choice between obviously least cost routing, going out to the rest of the world, or being able to manage and be able to send traffic to domestic locations via your internet exchange point. You reduce your dependency on foreign exchange. If I keep talking about foreign exchange, it's because I was trained as an economist. So this and concepts like balance of payments accounts, they matter a lot to me. Okay, this is the very first important step, I think, the first real concrete step that you can take in your economy, the introduction of your first domestic internet exchange point, because that reduces your reliance on external networks for you to operate. And there are many good examples of how internet networks have run unhindered in times of duress. When a country launches a denial of service attack against another country, we've seen cases where the domestic exchange points allow essential services like banking and e-commerce to continue unhindered, even though international entry points for data are being saturated. So this is the fantastic first step we want to take, but it's not the eventual step we want to take. And that's going to appear in our next slide. And that's where we have multiple internet service providers operating in the country in what we call a network supporting carrier or carrier supporting carrier mode, or running NSPs, network service providers, networks that carry other networks. When you've got multiple internet exchange points in your country, perhaps an internet exchange point in every large city, okay? This is eventually where you'd want to see the backbone network in your country end up to. And here's why. If you're wondering, okay, well, this isn't such a big deal, here's why. Before we get there, I have a question. How many of you operate businesses that lease out VPSs or virtual machines or things like that? Anybody here does that? One. Can you do it for $2? Yes or no? No. Anybody else? Thank you for being honest. Anybody else? But there are people, there are businesses that can do this for $2 in Amsterdam and Frankfurt, right? I'm going to show you why. Next slide, please. So I like the red and green network examples. We're going to go back to them. Sorry. This time, we've got a red network and a green network with a customer that wants to send traffic to each other. Let's say you're sending an email or an instant message. These two networks are connected via transit. I've taken the transit out because we want to assume they don't exist in this example. But they're also connected to two internet exchange points. In this case, internet exchange point 1 is very close to the red network, and internet exchange point 2 is very close to the green network. So we're going to hit play on the packet and see what happens, okay? And sort of a step-by-step mode, but you'll see the point I'm trying to make. So we've got the red customer wanting to send a packet to the green customer. How do packets move in this equation? Well, the red customer is paying the red ISP network for IP transit. So please, will you take my packets and take my money and deliver this to me to the green customer over on the other side? So the very first iteration that we have is that the packet moves from the red customer into the red ISP network. Now, as the red ISP, you have two choices. You go, okay, I have to deliver this to the green customer. My routing table tells me that I can either send it to the exchange point that is close to me, IXP1, or I can send it to the exchange point that is far away from me, which is IXP2. Human beings, most of us are intuitive. When we look at this picture, intuitively, we think, it should go to IXP1 because it's closer. But routers aren't intuitive. Computers are not intuitive. And so the network operator has programmed the network with certain characteristics that they want the network to follow and use. And in this case, the characteristic that they're going to use is, I want to send it along the path that's going to cost me the least. And the path that costs you the least is usually the path that is closest to you. So in this case, the red network makes an economic choice, not a performance choice. They make an economic choice, which says, offload this to the internet exchange that is the cheapest for me to get to. And that should be internet exchange point 1. So the red packet enters internet exchange point 1. Now, the agreement between the red and the green network is called peering. And when you peer with somebody, you agree to accept traffic from their network for your customers and to deliver it to your customer. So in this case, the green network actually doesn't have a choice. It's going to accept the packet that the red network has sent it into the internet, into exchange point 1, and he's going to pull it across that long backhaul that he's got into his network. Once it gets into his network, he knows it has to go to his customer, so he's going to deliver it to his green customer. And that's the first part, or one half, of how this traffic delivery equation looks. And if you pause and think about this for a minute, you'll think, that doesn't look right. The red customers, or the red network, seems to have gotten the better part of this deal. The green network has got to put in that very, very long distance fiber, which probably is going to cost a lot more than the very short fiber that the red network has to put in. But fortunately, internet transactions are send and receive. And what we're going to see now is what happens to the return packet. So now it's the turn of the green customer to signal back to the red customer to say, hey, I've got your instant message, or I've got your email. So the green packet enters the green network, as you can see. And now the green network has to make the same decision that the red network made a short while ago. Where do I deliver the packet? Do I send it on the path that I've received it on, that really long fiber that I got, which might be from a different country? Or should I send it along this cheap path that is exchange point 2 that is next to me? And as you guessed, the green network makes the same economic choice that the red network makes. It delivers it to IXP2. And now it's the turn of the red network to say, well, I've got to backhaul this all the way into my network across the long path and eventually deliver it to my customer. So, and deliver to my customer. That's how packet flows. That's how packets should flow across the internet. Because in a model like this, where internet service providers or multiple internet service providers connect to multiple internet exchange points that are close to one or equidistant, but where there's this kind of traffic sharing in place, or this kind of network performance in place, what we see is that every network becomes responsible for their own costs. Next slide, please. In this example, the red network had to build to get connected to the internet exchange point, which was close to it, which means it had to install fiber into the ground to get connected to exchange point 1, which was very cheap. It had to install fiber to get to exchange point 2, which was not so cheap. And it had to invest in backhaul, in fiber to the home, in wireless to the home, in 5G or LTE, whatever people are using to get connected to its customers. But the important part of this is that whatever the red network invested in its network was only for itself. It was only for its own costs. The red network was in no way subsidizing the green network. In fact, the green network, next slide, please. The green network had its own set of costs, similar to the red network here. Maybe they use different technologies, but you've got to build your own network. This is how internet networks are built today. You earn money from your customers, you take that money and you invest it in building and growing a network that works in a manner that you find most appropriate for your network. And service providers distinguish themselves based on service and how they're able to create or minimize costs for their customers. Next slide, please. What we get, though, and this is important, is we get fair sharing of costs. The red network covers their costs, the green network covers their costs, and at the end of the day, everybody's happy. Next slide, please. There's a theory we use at PCH, or a theorem we teach at PCH, that says that the efficiency of the internet depends on this principle, that everybody needs to have at least 2 internet exchanges, and they need to be so close or so far away from each other. But this to me is not important. What's more important is what's on the next slide. And that is that if you do not have an internet exchange point that is close to you in your city, in your country, in your economy, wherever you are, then you are disadvantaging yourself. Because if there's no internet exchange point that is close to you, next slide, please. If there's no exchange point that is close to you, you are going to always end up on the long path. You are always going to be paying that long cost that the green network is paying. And the only way you can reduce that cost is to have traffic exchange happen at multiple layers and multiple locations, so that you have better sharing of costs. So my friend with the $2 VPNs, now do you know why? Okay, you may not know yet, but now can you guess why the networks in Amsterdam and the networks in Frankfurt can do $2 VPSs? Because there are huge internet exchange points in those locations of the world. the routing table at DKIX is probably up to half of what you could expect to see in the routing table of the entire internet. Imagine being able to get to half of the internet for no cost. That is the real business advantage that a German service provider has. They put a piece of fiber into the DKIX and they can get to half the internet for the cost of an exchange point port, which is nothing, right? That is why they can do $2 VPSs and you can't. By the way, it's the same in my part of the world, but we're catching up. And that's, I think that is the message here. When Hisham was talking to me about where he thinks the Central Asian Peering Forum can go, it's that excitement that what's it going to take for you, now I can say us because I'm here, what's it going to take for us to get to that perspective where we can say, well, we're growing there too. Today, we may not have that much peering in our environment, but our goal is that $1 or $2 VPS in a few years' time. How do we get there? Better peering. Actually, thank you. I was going to ask you to change. This would be the second thing that I ask you to remember. This is really important. It's a very simple equation. Speed times distance equals cost. So, question time. How many of you think the internet is too cheap? How many of you want to pay more for your internet services? Or how many of you have customers that want to pay more for your internet services? Do you have customers that come to you and say, I really like your service. I think you are too cheap. Here's more money. Do you have that? This is my first time here, so I have to ask. You don't? But, okay, so do you have customers that say, we don't want to pay more money, we want it cheaper? Yeah? Okay. So in this simple equation, we know one thing. We know we have to reduce cost. Okay? We have to reduce cost. So we've got two variables. You have speed and distance. All right? Let's go back to your customers. How many of your customers come to you and say, the internet, it's too fast? Take us back to dial-up days. 33.6 modem, US robotics. Do any of you have customers that say the internet is too fast? Anybody wants a slower internet? Don't laugh. There was somebody in Barbados that said the internet was too fast. And it's not, by the way. It's not. So, okay, we know that we have to reduce cost, and we know that we only have two variables, and we can't change speed because nobody wants slower internet access. So if we're going to continuously try to drive down cost, we really only have one thing that we can play with, and that is distance. And that is the distance to get our users to whatever it is that they're looking for, whether it's some media streaming service, whether it's a government website, whatever it is going to be. We know that we need to reduce the distance that service is being provided across. And remember what I told you earlier on when we were talking about introducing two service providers, and I told you the natural tendency of the network is to try to do that on its own. That's what BGP does for you, right? Reduce distance. So keep that in mind, because I think over the next 2 days, this has got to be something you think about all the time. And that is, how do I get my users closer to what they're looking for, and how do I get those things closer to me? All in the name of making it cheaper to run your business and provide a service to your customer. Okay, next slide, please. I'm going to pause for a second because we can do that and say we've spoken a lot about the theory. I've tried to talk to you about the economics of peering and how peering works. Are there questions on this stuff? Let's pause and answer questions because I'm getting tired of talking. And it's also a good way to stop before we start talking about the peering forum and some of the things that it will bring to you. So questions. I think we have a microphone. You need a microphone because of the translators. So, there we go. And just for the people that might be listening in remotely, please introduce yourself and tell us where you're from.
Sure. Okay. Let me stand. So I represent the third tier ISP in Azerbaijan, and thanks for great presentation for peering and the IXPs, and that's very important topic for us. So my question is, so you mentioned that transit networks are not really interested in peering because they can get more like money from third tier ISPs. So what is the logical, rational way to create a peering in a country? So there should be some association of the third tier ISPs, or it should be created by the government, or I don't know. So who should create and who should be interested in creating this peering, and what's the financial model behind this peering? Like maybe there's a membership fee, because like yesterday in Omantel event, I met with a peering company from Japan. They say that in Tokyo, it's a NGO that runs peering, and it's for free for everyone. So that's the question. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a good question. That was a fantastic question, actually. All right. So there are multiple parts to that question. The first part was who or how do I get peering with other internet service providers? It's true, your transit provider is not going to want to peer with you because your transit provider is going to think that they're going to make money from selling stuff to you. And that's okay. There's always going to be a transit business. The thing that transit providers get really nervous about is that they think that when people start to peer, that there's not going to be a transit business anymore. And that's absolutely nonsense. Because if you're going to peer, you're going to exchange the sum of the networks that are domestic to you right now. You're going to exchange the sum of the networks that are maybe regional to you as well, depending on how big your network is. But I live in South Africa. It's very, very, very inconceivable to me that you're going to find a network here in Kazakhstan or in the region that has my ISP as a customer, a direct customer. So for you and I to communicate with each other, it's probably going to go through our transit providers. There's always going to be a market for transit. Over time, that market is probably going to erode or not, depending. Maybe you and I get along really well and we email each other every day, so there'll always be traffic and more traffic, and you send me pictures of your dogs, please don't, things like that. It's very difficult to predict how markets grow. But I'll tell you one thing that's true. One thing that's true for people across the world is that they want more. That's it. People want more. You think about it. This morning when Hisham and I were checking in, he gave me his chocolate and I got another one because, well, I wanted more because I like chocolates. If you have a girlfriend or boyfriend and you buy them something nice, they're going to want more of it because that's what people want. They all want more, right? If you free up space on your transit circuits, all that's going to happen is that your user base, your customers, are going to want more. The network will sense that there is additional capacity, and that capacity will get filled by something that is not in your network, right? Something that might come from Mexico, which is probably not here as well. And this is what I tell transit providers all the time. Your business is not going to go away. We have one internet where everybody is interconnected, and now we are sharing more and more than ever before. All that's going to happen if your customer moves your sort of local traffic onto a local peering circuit, that just means there's more capacity for international content. And there's always more international content being created. So yeah, you're not going to peer with your transits, but who you will get to peer with are the other smaller service providers that are in your facility, that are in your area. Who you'll get to peer with will be your e-government services, because the government's going to want to peer with everybody, because everything, it's the role of the government to try to be as accessible to everybody. Who you get to peer with will be content networks that are going to end up there, either domestic or local content networks as they operate, because they're less interested in trying to get through service or rather transit providers to get to you, but to get to you directly. And that's a good way to start, right? Your question about who should run this, well, there's two parts to this, right? I always think that internet service provider associations have historically done a lot to start and grow internet exchange points. And in a lot of places in the world, internet service provider associations are really good vehicles to grow and to build and grow internet exchange points. But I think ultimately for me, the running or the management of an exchange is best done when it's done by a community of people. Aside from working for PCH, I should have told you this as well, I apologize. I also run 3 internet exchange points in my country. We have 6 in South Africa, 3 are run by the community, and I'm responsible for that. I'm the person that you blame if anything ever goes wrong. And the other 3 are private data center. We won't talk about that. What I love about the community-run internet exchange points is and what I tell people all the time, if you're a network operator, you will start to realize very quickly that a significant portion of your costs, a significant dependency on your network working all the time, is tied to the internet exchange point. So as a service provider, you become, how can I say this nicely? You become concerned about the internet exchange point, and you become worried that the exchange point is going to work all the time. And the way that I tell people, the best way for you to fix that worry is, if the exchange is adding value to your business, then take one of your network engineers or 2 of your network engineers and get them to donate a little bit of time to making sure this runs properly. For those of us that are techies here, running a layer 2 switch is not a difficult thing. Right? It literally takes a minute to put something into a new VLAN and to apply a template. And if that's all your exchange is doing, a simple layer 2 switch, it doesn't take a lot of time. I got involved in peering because the company that I worked for was the host of the internet exchange point. We had a data center, and we were asked to run the internet exchange point or be the responsible parties for it. And I can tell you, even as a techie, it didn't take us a lot of time. And what we did over time was we created a community, a body of volunteers, logging everything that happened. And that body of volunteers has grown into different things. And today it's become a community-run internet exchange. So I think exchanges should be community-run. And I have a lot of reasons for that. But Vahan is telling me I've got 10 minutes, so I should move on. We can talk about that outside. I think peering should be free. I don't think that you need to pay to get connected to an internet exchange. And there are people like ourselves, PCH, and there are other folks like ISOC who donate equipment to help to keep internet exchanges running at low or no cost, right? A lot of folks talk about the business model to internet exchanges. And I think there are lots of people that want to make money out of internet exchange points, and there are people that do that right now. And if that's what your community wants, fine, okay. I'm not going to tell you no. If your community decides that you want to do this, listen to your community. But if you're just starting, then charging people a lot of money for a service that's only just beginning is probably not a good way to do it. That would be my advice. Okay, so 10 minutes, we should finish these on how you can benefit or what you could do at CAPIF. I love this photograph. this is a photograph that was taken at the African Peering and Interconnection Forum I forget when, but it was in Senegal. And for me, this photograph represents 3 different continents. MidTier, the guy in the blue shirt, was the chair of France IX, and he was arguing with Roderick, the skinny African bloke in the, what is that, cream shirt, who is a researcher, and Simon, who is the gentleman with glasses on the right-hand side. Simon is from Bangladesh. For me, this is what a peering forum is. It's people with diverse backgrounds coming together to talk very passionately, to argue passionately, to try to work out what is going to work best for them in their particular scenario. So everything that I would want to see happen out of, I guess, any kind of peering forum, to me, this photograph represents that discussion. This is what I hope you get. I hope that CAPIF grows into a forum where you have operators, exchange points, researchers, all coming together to share their work, but hopefully to build an ecosystem that leads to more productive peering. You know this already, but what the peering forum will bring you is it's going to be a list of network operators like yourselves, possibly cable operators, CDNs, exchange points. But this, for me, is a perfect, the peering forum is that perfect storm. It is the wonderful mix of all the elements that you need to create that ecosystem for digital growth, right? I don't want to talk too much about this. I think that the slide itself is pretty self-explanatory. If not at CAPIF 1, then perhaps at CAPIF 2, you will definitely find the people that you are going to be looking for, because this is where they come to talk peering. And I'm not just making this up. I mean, when we started AFPIF, it was, I think, less than 30 people on the first meeting. You already have a huge advantage. There's lots more people here willing to talk, willing to collaborate. Today, AFPIF is 400 odd people. Last I checked, 483 at the last meeting, that are all there with one purpose, to talk about interconnection. And that interconnection is for one purpose and only one purpose: to drive down the cost of running their businesses. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. The reason that we do this, by the way, the reason that peering forums work so well is because you will have heard this saying before, that peering happens on a handshake basis. That's a fancy or simple way of saying that there's no argument about contracts. There's no discussion about, is this going to work? I'm not sure. You need to sign this. From the URL at the bottom, you'll get it in the slides. From the URL at the bottom, we at PCH, we surveyed 19 million peering agreements. Of the 19 million peering agreements that people had, 99.998% of those were done on a handshake basis. That means if you and I were peering, I asked you, do you need a contract? What are the terms you need to peer with somebody else? And 99.998% of the respondents said, no, we're just happy to peer. We understand it makes our business work better. So when you have that overwhelming number, and I'm not making this up, this is 5 years worth of research. You can find it at the URL below. When you have this overwhelming number of people that understand that peering is good and they just want to make it happen, then these forums are the natural melting pot where they all end up in. Next slide, please. How you get this done. So this is one of my more favorite parts of the peering forum. What we have is one of the things that we do is something called peering personals. And peering personals is kind of like speed dating. Are you comfortable? Do you know what speed dating is? You get 1 minute to introduce yourself and tell people why they should peer with you. It's 1 minute, so it can't be a sales talk, please. But in that 1 minute, you get to mention a few critical elements. You need to tell us what your autonomous system number is, or your AS number, your organization name, who you are, or your policy on whether you want to peer freely or you don't believe in peering freely, you want to be restrictive, an email address as to who they should contact. Usually it's going to be peering at your organization, and where you are willing to peer, which internet exchange points you're present at. So we're actually going to run peering personals in this event. I think there's 3 or 4 different slots where you can actually where you'll submit a slide, and then the organizing committee will call you out, and you get to come up on stage for 1 minute, introduce yourself, and tell people why to peer with you. Here's an example slide. For example, this is the tertiary education network in South Africa. This is a real peering personal slide that they sent from the last time we ran peering personals. So you can see this is the kind of thing that you are aiming to get done. I wish I could say there was a competition for people to make their slides look really, really nice, because you can as well. But please make sure you have these elements, and you can upload them. The organizing committee have put up a little upload page. So next slide, please. At that URL, now I apologize for the QR code. I hate telling people to do those things, but the URL is really, really long. But you can find it off the CA Perf website. So if you create your peering personal slide, you can go to the peering personal, you can go to that URL, you can upload it, it'll get sent through to the organizing team, and during the peering personal sessions, they'll ask you to come here and in 1 minute tell people why they should peer with you. It's loads of fun. I think I like it. And it's also a great way to meet the people that you're really looking for. Oh, that's the person from the CDN you'll remember them that way. Next slide, please. Other things that you'd want to bear in mind, if you don't know about peering DB, then you should. Peering DB is the canonical source of information for all networks that want to peer. So please, if you run a network and you are interested in peering, go along to peering DB. That's www.peeringdb.net, I think it is, and create an account for yourself. It's free to use. It's a really useful tool for folks that want to automate their network. And that's the way that most people are doing. That's what most people are doing these days. They're looking for ways to automate the setup and the optimization of their network. So having yourself in peering DB means that you can be included when people want to do peering with you using common tools. There are a whole bunch of really useful tools. If you search GitHub, you'll be able to find a lot of really useful tools that tie into peering DB that you can use. There are lots of talks on peering DB that you can find on the internet. I think there may even be one at this meeting, so I won't talk too much about peering DB. Next slide, please. That's what it looks like. I guess you can see it here. This is the peering DB page for PCH, or Packet Clearinghouse. You can see those are the internet exchanges that we're present at. This is information that you would use on how to find us, etc., etc. It's fairly self-explanatory to figure out. Next slide. I can't stress this enough. Please make use of an internet routing registry. You create an IRR object, either an AS set or Route 6 objects as applicable. I always tell everybody, create an AS set object. Trust me, even if you are one network, even if you think I don't have BGP customers, just do it now. Create your AS set object, and as you grow your network and get BGP customers, you can add to it into the future. The RIPE NCC have fantastic training material that they can share with you, or you can ask you can ask the RIPE NCC agents that are here. I believe they have help desk folk outside. If you're an internet exchange point and you're looking for training material on what you can use to train your folks, I'm happy to share with you the training materials that I use for my exchange points to train my peers on how they should set up their IRR stuff. Again, I can't say this enough. And please, once you've created your object, stick it into peering DB. Please create a peering @ email address. It's really not professional to have somebody say, please email ben@mydomain for all peering. It just doesn't work, right? So please, peering at is the common name that most of us use in the industry. It's how we expect to find you. Create a peering at email. It should be free for you, hopefully, and you can redirect it internally the way you want. I think we're not doing this in the full extent here, but peering bilaterals are probably my second favorite part of peering forums. This is a chance where you get to speak one-on-one to have high bandwidth time to people that you're looking to peer with. So for example, we're PCH, we have a large Anycast global network. For DNS, if you're looking to peer with me, then a peering bilateral time would be where you could sit down with me and you could convince me on why we should come to your internet exchange point, for example. Or if you're looking for, I don't know, Amazon or something like that, this is the opportunity that you would get. Now, normally this is tied into a meeting tool event. Unfortunately, we didn't get one operational for CAF CAPERF 1. Hopefully it'll be around the next time. But what there is a meeting room available on the M floor, the Ablai Khan meeting room on the M floor, and you can you can set up and run sessions, peering sessions there with folks. And finally, I think this is where we want to be, where you've got local content, local hosting, local IXPs, and that nirvana spot in the middle. Because we don't have the time now in this talk, but I can show you that any other position is an export of capital out of your economy. And if you think you're a rich country and you are happy to export capital, I'm not going to stop you. I know that mine isn't, my region of the world isn't, and we work hard to keep our hard-earned dollars in our region. So yeah, I think that's it. I don't think I have anything else except this is how you can contact the organizers for more for feedback. If there's things that you would like included, please note this down. I'm sure that during the course of the event, they'll provide this to you later on. And if you're looking to contact me, then these are my details. And we're out of time. So I don't know if Vahan is going to let me do questions or we'll do questions during coffee break. Coffee break.